really excited about our next session with John. Live chat is a passion of mine. I have studied live chat in a really deep way, and John has taken it a step further and said live chat is such an important component of your business that how many years have you been doing this, John? You've known about live chat for a while now.
Yeah. So it'll be 6 years in December.
Oh my gosh, because it feels like people are on board with live chat as a concept today, but I feel like 6 years ago, you were like looked at like a crazy person, especially in e-commerce, maybe in like enterprise B2B, but specifically in pre-sales and e-commerce, it just didn't feel like a thing. Like Bose didn't have a good, process. Best Buy, Dell, all the big players maybe had something that you could do, but for the most part, they were quite. It was way far behind. And now we've got great automations and flows and proof that this drives revenue. So I'm really excited to talk live chat. I will let you talk about it, and I will sit in the wings and share in the chat and keep people happy there. So
Awesome. You can see the blue screen right now, right, Derek?
Yeah, I see your screen. It's not full screen, but it's definitely good enough.
Yeah, it's almost, because I'm gonna be bringing in kind of a whitebboard thing too. You see the whiteboard now?
I love it. Awesome.
We're gonna get kind of fancy here with the tech, but super excited to be able to chat with you guys today, and also just be involved with everybody else that's presenting. It's such a good crew that Derek and the team have put together, and gorgeous. What I want to go into today is solving a problem with traffic, paid traffic specifically. If you are in the process of scaling your store, you're at any reasonable scale, paid traffic is just part of the game as far as really scaling up your sales. And traffic's expensive. There's a reason why Facebook is valued the way Facebook is. There's a reason why Google is valued the way Google is. Traffic is expensive. And if you dig deeper, what you start to see is, you invest all this money in paid traffic, but you end up losing a ton of conversions. So even if you can make paid traffic be profitable for you, if you really dig into the data and look at how many conversions you're losing or your cost per lost conversion, it can be a little bit frustrating. And to give you guys some data points, what I've done is I've pulled in, an example store that I'll walk through. But what we typically see is 50% of checkouts that start the checkout process end up abandoning. So 50% of people that start checkout end up abandoning. You might be at 40%, you might be at 60%, but at scale, looking at hundreds of stores, we see around 50%. What a lot of people don't dig into, though, because that's fairly well known in e-com, what a lot of people don't dig into is that a lot of that happens very deep in the checkout process. So for example, on the shipping page, on the payment page, a lot of those abandons happen, deeper in the actual checkout process. And so the example store that I've got here, it's a little bit of a bigger store because I wanted to really make sure that data was super valid at scale with a lot of traffic. But I want to be clear, these numbers on a percentage basis, they will scale down to smaller stores. They'll also scale up. But basically, this is a very typical store for what we would see as far as percentage of abandons. And I'm going to go into how to save a lot of these with live chat. But in this particular case, I'm going to move some things around here on my screen over here. This particular store does $900K a month in revenue. What you're seeing here is 7 days of data. So I'm going to give it to you on kind of a weekly basis, but I'll kind of communicate it in a monthly basis. They do $900K a month selling basically clothing without getting too specific. And again, those numbers will scale down to smaller stores. Pretty solid site-wide conversion rate, though. If you look at that over here, 3.5%, basically 3.47%. Pretty solid when you look at that on a site-wide basis of every visitor at this type of scale, because they're driving a ton of traffic. But if you dig deeper into this, what you're going to see on this slide here is a couple data points. And the reason why I'm using, for those of you that know a lot more about GA, about Google Analytics, the reason why I'm using this particular view for the checkout abandonment is I like to dig deeper into the actual page views of like where exactly are they abandoning, and it's a little messy on the funnel view of analytics. But basically what you're seeing here, and again, this is weekly data, is 10,500 people per month or per week are starting the checkout process, but not actually completing. And this is not the cart. This is not people adding to the cart. This is people getting into the checkout process. and not actually completing and reaching the end of that process. So that's the 10,500. This second number though, 6,506, is the number of people that get to the payment page but don't abandon but don't complete. And so this is people that literally chose the product, added to cart, obviously, enter their contact information, enter their shipping information. They're on the payment page. They may have entered their payment information, but they're not actually converting. And so I want you to notice from these two numbers, it's basically 60% of the people that abandon on the payment page. And again, that's fairly typical for what we would see. And if you dig into your store, you're going to see something along the same lines. But it's a massive number. And to give you some context here, I'm going to kind of experiment with some tech and move a bunch of stuff around. But based on the calculator here, 6,566 people per week, 4 weeks in a month. The average order value, I think, was $48. It's 1.2 million in revenue is abandoning on the payment page. This is not the whole checkout process. It's not cart abandonment, just the payment page. I want to be super, super clear, and I tell this to all prospects and just any presentations we get. You're never, ever, ever going to get even a big chunk of those. So I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, like let's get half of it and we'll significantly grow. I just want you to understand the scale of what you're seeing is on the payment page, on the credit card page, massive, massive amount of dollars. In this particular case, abandoning, and the same will happen for your store. You can pull this same type of data in your own store by basically looking at people that get to checkout but don't get to the confirmation page. It varies depending on it's Shopify or BigCommerce or these other platforms, but you can pull the data for your store. Key thing I want you to understand though is, a lot of sites use cart abandonment emails and variations of cart abandonment emails. But the key thing to understand is, those typical cart abandonment processes and emails and ads, they just stop moving the needle at a certain point. And what you got to understand is that people abandon, especially on the payment page, people abandon because they have a question or they have a stuck or they have something that, caused them to say, not yet. Or, I need to get this information before I can move forward. And so it's definitely something that, needs some sort of back and forth with a customer to be able to answer those questions. You can use a lot of live chat information to improve the checkout flow and improve your FAQs and do those things. I'll touch on that at the end. But ultimately, cart email reminders and discounts and those types of things, they just don't really move the needle. Most people look at live chat as a CS tool, customer service tool. They have their CS team running it, and they really just look at it as another channel of customer service, and frankly, a pretty inefficient method of customer service because it's very time intensive to do live chat and to handle a lot of chats if you're a fairly large store. But live chat can definitely be a tool to drive just massive, massive conversions. In a lot of ways, but for today, to give you an example, if we go back to this particular slide, remember there's 6,566 people per week on the payment page that don't end up going into the checkout. This particular site converts 3.5% of everyone, every single visit, right? So what I would look at is say, okay, on the payment page, like what percentage of those might we be able to convert? And just using, rough numbers, if we say 6,566 times 4 for the monthly number, right? And then we say basically, look, can we convert 7% of those? It's double the site-wide conversion rate, but remember, this is the payment page. Credit card's already there. Sometimes contact information is already there. Like there's high intent here. It turns into 1,800 orders a month. And if we look at it on their average order value, that might be a couple bucks off on the average order value, 88 grand a month. That's $1 million a year of additional revenue by converting 7% of the payment page. So the numbers can get really big. If you do 10% of those people, it's another $125,000 a month. But bottom line, what I want you to understand is if you laser focus chat efforts on people that are abandoning, like I'm going to show you today, you can drive a ton of additional revenue. So like Derek mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but at Helpflow, what we do is we provide 24/7 live chat teams to over 100 e-commerce stores. It's actually our team doing the chat and being the humans on your site answering visitors' questions. We've been doing this for almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years in December. Time goes by very fast. hundreds of clients, millions of chats, and we've driven over $100 million in revenue directly through chat using the strategies that I want to talk through today. And to be clear, like, you do not need to use a service like us. You don't need to use an outside team. But my hope out of this session is that you do use live chat to be able to really save some of your abandoned carts. So getting into it, what I'm going to do is pull open my magical sketch screen here. Hopefully the technology will keep up with us. There we go. So basically there is,
I could see the screen earlier, but I can't see it now.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. The Mac or the iPad doesn't keep it. There we go. Cool. So basically, there's really 3 places where live chat fits in to drive conversions. And again, like, the notes will be out after, but I wanted to just simplify this down by just drawing it out and showing you some examples on that side of things. But the first place that chat really fits in is in the checkout process. So by having chat in the checkout process, you're able to basically get there when somebody is confused, or get there when somebody is going to abandon. And again, it's just like an offline store or an offline environment. If somebody's walking around a brick and mortar store, like they used to before COVID, if they look confused, if they look like they're gradually getting more and more frustrated, a good employee is going to walk up and say, hey, can I help you find something, right? You want to be able to do the same thing in chat by basically being there in the checkout process and engaging with people in the checkout process. I already said that earlier, so I'm not going to like say, okay, that's that section of the presentation. I want to get a little more granular, a little more ninja on as far as how to do this. The name of the game here is basically to predict if somebody's going to abandon based on data, and then engage a step or 2 or 3 before they abandon. And so basically what you can do using Google Analytics, you can do this with a couple other platforms too, but GA is good enough, is basically build a model to say, okay, in analytics, show me only the people that abandoned. So filter the view to say, show me only people that got into checkout but did not get to the thank you page. Show me those people. And then basically build a model to see the patterns of what leads up to those abandons. And typically what you're going to see is time on pages in checkout. It's a little different depending on each e-commerce platform that you can use, but basically time in each section of the checkout. You're going to see things like certain types of products may lead to higher abandon rates or different abandon patterns, or you may see just a general slowdown in activity between the checkout pages. So if somebody ends up on the payment page and sits there, something might be off, right? Look at how long people spend on those pages, and then basically engage with them right before they abandon. And so in this particular case, the most important part is figuring out that data point to say, okay, like, when is the right time to actually engage with somebody? And then you have the chat pop up and invite them to chat. And one of the things I notice is a lot of people get pretty fancy with like, well, what should the chat invite say? And like, should we include the product in there? And should we say, welcome back, Derek, we haven't seen you since Tuesday. Like, are you gonna buy this thing yet? You don't want to get too crazy with the actual invites. You want to keep it general, not salesy, and somewhat informal. So something like, sorry to interrupt you, I want to let you know I'm online. Do you have any questions I can help with? Or, hey, I wanted to let you know I'm online. Do you have any questions I can help with? Nothing super fancy there. The timing is what matters the most. So that's the first piece, is getting chat into the checkout process. To clarify, on Shopify, you technically need Shopify Plus to be able to do this. I'd recommend using Shopify Plus, even just for a feature like this, because getting into the checkout process and engaging with people very close to the transaction, very, very valuable. But you can also do it without Shopify Plus by basically getting them when they click out of the checkout, because most abandons, based on what we see, they don't just close this page, they go backwards, they click the back button, then they close the page. It's not as good, but definitely something you can do without Shopify Plus. So once you have this information, or once you have chat in the checkout, you're able to engage with them right before they abandon, which is definitely a good thing. Next thing I want to show you, though, is connecting with people in, I'll keep that other slide open, connecting with people in 2 areas related to product page. You're going to see some Asana notifications at the top there. Product and category pages. And again, my writing might get sloppier as we move faster. again, I'm not saying like just have chat on the checkout pages. The name of the game here is to track if somebody is starting to get confused looking for products, and then help them find the product. So let me show you an example of that. And for this one, I'm going to use a live website. This is not a client. I just want to use like a generic site. But houseplans.com, they sell plans for houses. Pretty good domain name. But in this particular case, to use the example, let's say, okay, I'm looking for 4-bedroom house, 2 bathrooms, 1 story, 2 garages, so I can get that office that I wanted. I search for my plans. Okay, it's pre-filtered. It's a pretty good navigation flow on a site like this, but there's a lot of plans, right? And so one of the things that you can do here is track how long somebody spends on a category page, but they don't get into a product page. So if I spend all my time on this page just kind of scrolling around and applying filters and doing a bunch of stuff, I'm not seeing a plan that interests me. And so you can do that in a couple ways. On this particular site, it's pretty simple because you can see that their URL structure is based on search, and then their different search parameters being applied. Some stores don't do that, so you have to do it with event tracking or something else, probably in Google Tag Manager. Pretty simple from a development perspective to push that type of data in to Google Tag Manager and then feed it to chat. But if you have questions on that, we can go into it offline, because that's a little technical. But the name of the game here is, if somebody's looking through a whole bunch of your products, but not moving into a product page, and obviously not moving into the cart page, invite them to chat, just like we did in the checkout process. On the cart or on the actual product pages, you can get even more specific to say, okay, somebody's interested in this product, but they're not moving into the cart, or they're not adding it to their favorites. In this case, with a highly considered purchase like this, the odds of them moving straight into the cart anyway are going to be really low. So you want to look at like what's an equivalent conversion that indicates very high intent. I'm not saying that's equivalent to a checkout, but you get the idea. In this particular page, the way we'd approach this or recommend approaching this is look at basically things like scroll depth or like in-page activity to say, okay, this person's clearly interested in this product. They looked at a bunch of different products, but now they're on this particular one, and they have expanded this, even though there's not much here. Some of the other plans have a lot more information. They've looked through the floor plans. They've looked through the other floor plan. They've gone into the specifications. Maybe they started a cost to build report, which is up here. There's a range of things on the page that can indicate intent. And that's what you're trying to measure here. Say, okay, they're clearly interested, but again, they're not moving into the actual cart process. And then the name of the game there is to invite them to chat and answer their questions. And so to use this particular site as an example, this is the same site that we talked about earlier. The screen looks the same, but it is different data. Over here, what you're seeing is basically the number of people on the site here per week, 42,000 per week for this number here, that view a product page, so at least one, but they don't move in to the actual checkout process. So that's some engagement, right? Of like they viewed a product page, but they didn't move into checkout, but that's not enough engagement really. What I would typically do is dig deeper and say, okay, like show me people that viewed multiple products, but didn't move into the checkout. And that's what this number is here, 37,000 a week. Depending on how your site navigation flow is set up and how you merchandise your products and all those types of things, it's going to be slightly different of exactly how you're going to set up that metric. But the key thing I wanted you to understand here is on this particular site, we're talking about 37,000 people per week that look at multiple products, but don't move into the actual checkout flow. And so if I look at this, that is per month, about 150,000 people per month. How many of those can we convert into actual orders? And again, this was for the apparel site. We're back to the original site. Remember that they convert 3.5% of everyone, right? Pretty solid site-wide conversion rate. What percentage of super engaged product viewers could we expect to convert? And in this particular case, what I would say is half of the site-wide conversion rate. It might be the site-wide conversion rate, it might be a little bit higher, but I tend to err on the side of being fairly conservative, especially on this number, because you don't know like what's the intent of that traffic, how much window shopping is going on. But in this particular case, what you want to look at is, how many people on your site are super engaged in the product, but not moving into checkout. And in this particular case, let's say you convert, 1.25%, it's 1,800 visitors or 1,800 purchases, which is 89 grand, another $1 million in annual revenue for this particular site. I don't know if it's going to be 1%, 3%, 5%, half a percent. But the bottom line is when you have people on your product pages, they're interested in the product, but very few of them are going to move into checkout. And if you can engage with them and really help them through that process and spark up those conversations, then you're going to be able to move some of them into the actual checkout flow. And if you have anywhere near reasonable economics in your business, it's going to make sense to be able to have a team actually doing those chats. So bottom line on this particular one is having chat in the actual checkout flow and in the product and category pages. The last one that I want to dig into, and I'll start moving a little bit slower because we're doing okay on time, is email flows. So I talked about abandoned cart emails earlier, and everyone should be doing abandoned cart emails. So like Derek mentioned, right, like implement 1 to 3 things out of this event. If you're not doing email cart abandonment emails, focus on getting that in place. That's table stakes at this point in e-com. What we see though is most stores, and this is better than not doing anything, but most stores use some variation of a reminder and then a discount and then a Hail Mary discount over 3 to 5 days. It depends on your purchase cycle. It depends on if you want a discount or not in your brand and that type of stuff. But it's typically reminder discount, Hail Mary discount, 3 to 5 days. What that fails to address is that most people abandon because they had a question. Something held them back from buying. They didn't forget about buying. They didn't forget that they put in their credit card. Something stopped them from actually completing that purchase. That's not to say that reminder discount is not going to convert. That's not what I'm saying. But you need to keep the visitor's mindset in mind and say, okay, like, why did they abandon in the first place? And in most cases, it's because of a question or an objection or something that happens. It's sales 101. And so one of the things that you can do is, and I don't have a screenshot for this particular one, but you can configure a call to action in the cart abandonment emails to basically say, have a quick question, our team's online, click here to chat, or something along those lines. The wording can be flexible, but basically what you're trying to do is say, we're online if you just have a quick question. They press that button, it brings them back to the checkout process, very similar to normal abandoned cart emails. It's literally the same link, it's just a tag link that opens the chat box. But basically, they see that in the email. They don't need a discount or reminder. They're still probably going to take you up on the discount though. They click the link, it opens the chat box, they ask their question. They say, yeah, I'm ordering this as a gift and I want to make sure it's going to arrive on time or whatever the question is. And then you and your team are able to actually answer those questions and get them to convert. And so the main aspect there that you're trying to do is take that email communication that typically happens in an email flow and it's not real time anymore and bring it back to a real time chat experience where somebody can ask those questions. And so that's really what you want to do with the cart abandonment emails is make it easy to answer a question. Some people will email you back, but most people, it's quick questions. They didn't take the time to email you in the first place or pick up the phone, but they'll click a link if it seems like the team is going to be there to answer that question. So as far as the main things that matter to be able to drive conversions with chat, key things that we talked about is is adding chat into the checkout process, having chat as part of that product and category navigation process, and then also having chat in the cart abandonment emails. If you do those pieces and do them well, you're going to be able to recapture a lot of potential abandons with live chat. One of the things I always call out though in sessions like this is basically do-it-yourself mistakes. Again, I mentioned that you can absolutely do this yourself. You do not need an outside chat team to put chat on your site. It's not necessary. If you have the team to do it, then you should absolutely be doing it. With that said, you have to understand that live chat is one of the few marketing techniques or tactics or whatever you want to call it, strategies, that if you do it poorly, it doesn't just not work, it causes your conversion rate to go down. And the reason why that happens is people that would have bought without live chat being there in the first place will engage with chat because it's there. Then they'll get annoyed with the chat experience or some sort of configuration. I'm gonna go through those in a second. And then they'll leave. A portion of them will leave, not all of them, but a portion of them will leave. So people that would have bought without the chat even being there end up bailing because the chat was a poor experience. And so I wanna call out just a couple key things that can really cause the chat experience to go down. Number one is what I will call pre-chat forms. And this is going to be a little bit controversial, probably. Conversion optimization 101 is don't add friction to the purchase process. There are certain cases where if you want to qualify people and it's high ticket, like there are intentional reasons to add friction to the process. But with chat specifically, getting people onto chat is an opportunity to get way more of them to convert. When we chat with people and when clients chat with people, if they do it well, you're typically going to see the chat conversion rate be 4 to 6 times higher than if somebody doesn't chat. And so getting people into a chat conversation is an opportunity to convert them. Even if you have a high scale site, or high traffic site, the numbers shake out all the way through the funnel. So using a pre-chat form that requires people to enter their name and email address, is this pre-sale, post-sale, what's your favorite color? Adding any sort of information at the front end of the chat is going to cause a certain percentage of people to click the chat, see the form, and go, I don't want to fill this thing out. It's probably a marketing thing. So using a pre-chat form is going to add friction. In general, what you want to do is just make it very, very simple for somebody to ask a question. They click the chat box and the chat box opens up and there's a human there to answer that question. That's the first mistake. You can get emails, you can get order information, you can route chats inside of a conversation very seamlessly without doing it as a pre-chat form. It's a little bit more challenging technically, but it's absolutely doable. And you just want to think of the visitor's experience and make it low friction. So that's the first mistake. Second mistake is response time. And there's basically 2 response times. First, and technically it's called average. I'm going to call this conversation. There's really 2. My writing is getting a little sloppier. The worst experience that can happen is if somebody starts a chat, your greetings are timed perfectly, they're in the checkout, they're ready to rock, you submit, or the invite pops up, they ask a question, they take the time, they say, oh, Derek's here to help me, this is gonna be great. And they ask the question, and then nobody responds. That is not a good thing. First response time is one of the most important numbers, and you want that to be less than 10 seconds. Less than 10 seconds. I'm gonna move a little quick because I'm coming up on time. Less than 10 seconds is absolutely critical. This one's a little more flexible. It depends on what you're selling, depends where it's at in the conversation, so I won't go into it in this one. But first response time is critical, under 10 seconds, otherwise you start to lose conversions. And then the last piece is nights and weekends. I'll brush through this part real quick. But nights and weekends is critical for live chat because depending on what you sell, anywhere from 40 to 60% of your traffic is going to come outside of business hours. If you're B2C, it's going to skew even more heavily to be nights and weekends. So it's really important to have people there answering chat on your team during that time. Just having it during business hours is better than nothing for sure. It does make your abandoned cart email process a little wonky because how are you going to time those emails to not go out, outside of business hours? But it can be done if you don't deal with the abandoned cart email flows. So those are some of the mistakes that people make. If you're going to implement live chat, don't turn on the forms. Make sure your response time is fast. And in a perfect world, do nights and weekends. But that one's kind of an optional thing depending on your staff. So out of this session, what I want to make sure that you guys do is, number one, use live chat. Get it in the checkout process, get it on product and category pages, and make it part of your email flows. What I did is I put together a resource here that is a blueprint on how to go about doing live chat for ecom. And so if you go to helpflow.net/cc2020, like conversational commerce, you can download the live chat guide, and that'll go into a little more detail on some of the mistakes that we talked about that can kill conversion rate, different wording of chat invites, schedule, all those types of things. So definitely get live chat in place out of this. And if you're already using live chat, I think that blueprint's gonna give you some aha moments of like, ooh, we might be hurting conversion rate with this particular approach or that particular approach. So even if you're already using live chat, I think you'll get a lot of value out of that. And like I mentioned, we run live chat for a ton of stores. You don't need to use our service, but I'd be happy to do a strategy call. If you're doing over 30K a month, that's typically where it starts to make sense to have a full scale 24/7 team, whether it's in-house or external. And so what I'd be open to doing is doing a strategy call with anybody that's interested. That's a normal part of our process. And it's not salesy at all. Literally all it is doing what we did today, a little more structured process, but doing it with your actual data. And so we'll look at your abandonment rate and your payment page, abandonment rate and your product pages and all those pieces. And, whether you work with us or not, you'll get a lot of insights directly from that call that you can implement. It's a very consultative process because the service sells itself if you're a fit. So we just do these calls and walk you through, how to best drive conversion. So helpflow.com for the strategy call, helpflow.net CC 2020 for the blueprint. And feel free to reach out with any questions that you guys have. But I hope that this has been helpful for you to be able to just save some of those conversions and engage with people.
John, you blew my mind with this one concept. So to round this out, I did a mystery shopper report with a company, and we looked at 500 of the largest e-commerce brands and found that 64% of them, or something along those lines, had live chat widgets installed on their site. And the first thing is they actually, I think all that was everyone that had it installed on a very easy to find page. So it was popping up pretty early in the process. And of those brands, it was like 80 or 90% of the 64%. They basically just asked for your name and your email address and then sent it to the customer support team. And then they followed up with email more than 24 hours later. And you just said, you just like, and we actually found that led to a negative customer experience, and it lost a lot of revenue for these large companies. You said less than 10-second response time. And then what you did today that I haven't seen other people really explain that well, but I'm going to have to start integrating this when I talk about live chat. You put a lot of really specific barriers on when you engage somebody in a chat. In e-commerce, I think this is the most important thing you can do, because if you engage every single site visitor, you're going to have a really high cost of this with a lower return on investment. And now, just like we look at the bottom of a marketing funnel in general, and we think about how we want to spend money to convert our hot traffic and our less on our cold traffic and all that stuff, we can think about how to roll out live chat and first tackle that bottom of funnel right there at the checkout process, then move to our product and category pages, then move into our email list at large, let's say. And I love this idea because it's very safe. It's very sensitive to the margins that a lot of businesses might be operating in. And to me, there's no way this can fail if it's rolled out properly. So I love it. I'm blown away.
Awesome. Totally happy to help. And, if anybody has questions as you start to implement this stuff, feel free to reach out, whether it's through the site or email or, any way to reach me. I love just talking through this stuff with other store owners. And like I said, the service sells itself. So we don't pitch people. We walk through the data and just explain how it works. But either way, get live chat going, help your customers, and you'll drive more conversions.
Perfect. And I'm sharing the links here with everybody. Again, if you are with us, I want to make sure that you have access to the show notes. I took some great notes on this one, and you're going to want the show notes for this session for sure. They are right here. I just also shared those with everyone in chat. John, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to seeing Helpflow progress and tackle live chat for the industry at large. I think you've got just like a phenomenal focused business and you're crushing it. I love to see that.
Thank you so much. Take care, Derek.